When I saw him glance at my phone, my heart skipped, but not from fear of exposure. It was the messages he would see. The ones I forgot to delete. I tried to snatch the phone back, but he pulled it away deftly and kept reading. I watched his face change, line by line, feeling my life crumble in seconds. Yes, now he would learn the truth. But not the whole truth. His hands trembled as he scrolled further, and I knew he was about to reach the message that would destroy my life. The one message that explained everything and drew a thick line under it all. Or maybe tangled everything even more. Suddenly, my phone vibrated in his hands. A new notification lit the screen. I saw his face pale when he read the sender's name. He froze. Didn't even blink. I bit the inside of my cheek, an old habit when nervous. My nerves tangled with the horror of what I'd done. His breath quickened. I heard it clearly from 2 meters away, the distance between us. That was what I feared most. Because 3 months ago, I made a mistake, the one that changed everything forever, and now I didn't know what to do. But let me tell you how it really happened. Before I share the secret I tried to hide so carefully, write in the comments where you're watching this from, and answer, have you ever kept a secret so tightly that it still slipped through? The yacht rocked gently beneath my feet as we prepared to set sail, a forced optimism hanging in the air like the salty breeze. My husband stood beside me, his eyes distant, rehearsing some important deal in his mind. I caught myself studying the way his jaw tightened when he thought no one was watching, a silent signal of the tension we'd long ignored between us. The plan was simple, a weekend at sea, just the two of us and his boss, meant to patch what time and silence had torn apart. Yet, even in that moment, the distance between us felt as vast as the ocean we were about to cross. The boss appeared suddenly at the yacht's stern, tall and confident, carrying a presence that shifted the mood instantly. He greeted us with an easy charm, but I noticed the way his eyes lingered on me, just a bit too long, a little too knowingly. It was subtle, a glance hidden beneath polite smiles, but enough to send an unexpected ripple of unease through me. I forced a smile, reminding myself this was just a business trip, a chance to mend fences. But deep inside, a whisper of doubt began to rise. Was this really about fixing my marriage, or was it something else? My husband's demeanor was a study in controlled indifference. He spoke little, watching interactions between me and his boss with a guarded expression. I sensed his irritation, though he masked it behind practiced professionalism. That tension brewed quietly, like a storm gathering far offshore, threatening to break without warning. As we set sail, the yacht cutting through the waves, I felt the weight of unspoken words pressing down. Our conversations were sparse, clipped, filled with polite but empty phrases. The silence between my husband and me spoke louder than any argument ever could. It was a silence born not just of distance, but of exhaustion, from trying, from pretending, from hoping. In a rare moment alone, I caught my reflection in the cabin mirror. The woman staring back was tired, worn by years of neglect and unmet needs. I realized then how much I craved something I hadn't admitted in a long time, not just affection, but recognition. To be seen. To be wanted. That longing, quietly smoldering, set the stage for what was to come. Our first evening was marked by awkward attempts at conversation, each of us grasping for normalcy. The boss was effortlessly engaging, weaving stories and laughter that felt out of place against the backdrop of my faltering marriage. I found myself drawn to that warmth, that lightness, a stark contrast to the cold reserve between me and my husband. The distance wasn't just physical now, it was emotional, widening with every passing hour. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the water, I sensed a shift. The lines between what was expected and what was desired began to blur. The yacht felt less like a place of refuge and more like a stage for truths waiting to surface. I braced myself, not knowing how far I was willing to go to fill the emptiness inside me. That night, as I lay awake in the cabin, the gentle rocking of the yacht mirrored the turmoil in my mind. I thought of the life I'd built, the promises made, and the silence that had grown between us. Somewhere beneath the surface, I knew this trip was the beginning of a reckoning, for my marriage, for my heart, for everything I thought I understood about love and loyalty. The engine sputtered and died without warning, leaving us stranded in the middle of the vast, unyielding sea. The sudden silence was deafening, the hum of the motor replaced by the gentle slap of waves against the hull. It was as if time itself had paused, and with it, all the fragile pretenses we'd been maintaining. The sky stretched endlessly above, its blue vastness mocking the confinement we now faced. Without the reassuring noise of progress, every unspoken tension aboard grew louder, circling around us like the gulls wheeling overhead. Isolation settled quickly. No radio contact, no distant ships on the horizon, just the three of us and the open ocean. The boss took charge immediately, masking any hint of unease with his steady confidence. My husband, usually so controlled, now appeared irritable, pacing the deck with restless energy that betrayed his frustration. I watched them both, feeling a strange pull between them, one a source of order, the other of silent rage. In that suspended moment, my emotions surged unexpectedly. The exhaustion from years of quiet neglect pressed down, mixing with a curious sense of liberation. With no distractions, no scheduled meetings or digital noise, the facade began to crack. I found myself seeking comfort where I hadn't dared before, his eyes, his words, his presence. The boss was there in a way my husband was not, attentive, understanding, an anchor amid the uncertainty. Our conversations grew softer, more personal. He asked about my life beyond the corporate meetings, about things I hadn't shared in years. I responded cautiously at first, then with a tentative openness that surprised even me. We spoke of loneliness, not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that festers in company. It was a shared vulnerability, raw and unspoken. It was then, in the dimming light of the afternoon, that our eyes met and held. No words passed, but the air shifted. We kissed. We kissed. The simplicity of it startled me, the way his lips met mine, gentle but insistent, a confession without speech. It was a turning point, a silent agreement that the line we'd been dancing around had been crossed. The kiss wasn't about passion alone, it was a desperate grasp for connection, for feeling alive again. Meanwhile, my husband's cold detachment deepened. He busied himself with the yacht's controls, avoiding any interaction that might betray his inner storm. But I could feel his gaze, sharp and assessing, as if measuring what he couldn't yet confront. The distance between us became palpable, a chasm that no amount of sunshine or sea air could bridge. As the evening crept in, the sky turning a muted shade of gray, the yacht felt smaller, the silence heavier. Each of us carried our own private turmoil, yet none dared to voice it. The night promised no relief, only a prolonged reckoning with the choices that had already begun to unravel the life we knew. The morning brought no relief, only a heavier atmosphere thick with unspoken words and simmering frustration. My husband's face was set in a hard line, his jaw clenched tight as if trying to hold back a storm. I watched him move around the yacht with mechanical precision, each gesture sharp and controlled, betraying the tension coiled beneath. His irritation wasn't directed at the broken engine or the stalled journey, it was aimed inward and outward, simmering beneath the surface of our fragile facade. He spoke little, his words curt and clipped, avoiding any glance in my direction. When he did address me, his tone carried an edge that hadn't been there before, a quiet frustration that left no room for discussion. The cold distance that had been growing between us over the years now felt like a chasm wide enough to swallow us whole. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but found myself paralyzed by the weight of his silence and the anger I saw lurking behind his eyes. In contrast, the boss moved with a different energy, calm, deliberate, and almost unnervingly composed. He offered practical solutions to our predicament, taking control of the situation with a confidence that unsettled me more than I expected. His attention to me, so different from my husband's restrained demeanor, felt both comforting and dangerous. I caught myself drawn to him, not just for the help he provided but for the genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings. Our conversations grew more intimate, revealing cracks in the armor I had built around my emotions. I found myself confessing fears and disappointments that I hadn't voiced in years. The boss listened without judgment, his presence a steadying force amid the chaos of my tangled feelings. It was in these moments that I realized how much I had been starving for connection, not just physical, but emotional and intellectual. Yet, alongside this newfound closeness came a tide of guilt and confusion. I was painfully aware of the lines I was crossing, the betrayals accumulating with every shared secret and lingering glance. The conflict inside me intensified, a battle between loyalty and desire that left me breathless and uncertain. I was caught in a tempest not unlike the sea around us, restless, unpredictable, and threatening to consume everything in its path. The boss's gaze was magnetic, filled with a knowing warmth that both drew me in and warned me of the consequences. Our interactions became a delicate dance, each movement charged with unspoken meaning. I felt the pull of temptation and the weight of responsibility pulling me in opposite directions, neither willing to release its hold. My husband's growing irritability was impossible to ignore. He retreated further into himself, avoiding eye contact and conversation, his silence louder than any accusation. The tension between us was palpable, a fragile thread stretched to its breaking point. I sensed that beneath his controlled exterior lay a storm of emotions, hurt, anger, confusion, that he struggled to contain. The day wore on, the sun climbing higher and the sea around us calm yet indifferent. We were trapped not only by circumstance but by the shifting dynamics that had taken root among us. Each moment was charged with a mixture of fear and longing, the boundaries between right and wrong blurring in the haze of isolation. As evening approached, the weight of the day settled over me like a heavy cloak. I found myself retreating to the quiet of the cabin, the solitude both a refuge and a prison. The memories of that afternoon, the kiss, the stolen moments of connection, lingered in my mind, a bittersweet reminder of what I was risking and what I yearned to reclaim. The yacht's gentle sway was a constant reminder of our precarious situation, a metaphor for the instability of my own emotions. I was adrift in a sea of contradictions, struggling to find solid ground amid the rising tide of uncertainty. The night promised no easy answers, only the continuation of a journey fraught with peril, for my marriage, for my heart, for everything I thought I held dear. The morning light crept softly across the deck as the boss volunteered to inspect the engine, his movements purposeful yet unhurried. The yacht, still motionless in the vast expanse of sea, seemed to hold its breath as he disappeared into the engine room. The confined space became an unexpected arena where tensions simmered beneath the surface, waiting to spill over. Inside that cramped engine room, the air was thick with the mingling scents of oil and salt, a stark contrast to the crisp ocean breeze above. The boss worked with quiet competence, his hands steady as he traced the machinery's faults. But more than the mechanical task, it was the unspoken understanding between us that filled the space. I found myself acutely aware of his presence, the way his breath brushed against my skin, the subtle heat radiating from his body in the close quarters. Outside, the silence was heavy, broken only by the distant call of seagulls and the soft lapping of waves. My husband paced the deck, his figure tense and restless, casting occasional glances toward the hatch leading below. The gulf between us seemed to widen with each passing minute, his irritation palpable yet unvoiced. Inside, the conversation was sparse, filled with loaded pauses and glances that spoke volumes. We skirted around the edges of propriety, each gesture laden with unspoken questions and desires. His eyes held a mixture of reassurance and challenge, as if daring me to cross the invisible boundary we both sensed but hesitated to breach. The confined space amplified every sensation, the warmth of his hand as it brushed against mine, the quickened pace of my heartbeat, the faint tremor in my voice when I answered his cautious questions. I was caught in a web of conflicting emotions, guilt gnawing at the edges, curiosity pulling me closer, and a desperate need for connection I hadn't acknowledged before. Time seemed to stretch and contract simultaneously. Minutes blurred into an indistinct haze, marked only by the progress he made on the engine and the steady rhythm of our breathing. Outside, the world remained vast and indifferent, but within that small compartment, the air crackled with tension and possibility. As he straightened after completing the repairs, our eyes met in a fleeting moment of shared acknowledgement. No words were needed, the silence conveyed everything. I sensed the fragile line we were treading, the risk inherent in our proximity, yet neither of us moved to break the spell. Returning to the deck, the boss carried with him a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The yacht felt different, charged with an undercurrent of emotions that hadn't been there before. My husband greeted him with a curt nod, unaware of the silent exchange that had taken place below. The day unfolded with a strange blend of routine and undercurrent unease. We moved through tasks mechanically, each of us wrestling with our own private turmoil. The boss's attention to me was both a balm and a torment, a reminder of what I lacked and what I risked pursuing. I found myself watching him from across the deck, noticing the way the sunlight caught the lines of his face, the ease with which he commanded the space around him. There was a magnetic pull in his presence, an invitation to abandon caution and step into something unknown. My husband remained distant, his silence a wall that neither I nor the boss dared to scale. The tension between the three of us was a taut thread, vibrating with every exchanged glance and unspoken thought. The yacht, once a symbol of escape and renewal, had become a crucible where secrets simmered and loyalties were tested. As evening approached, the sky painted in hues of amber and purple, the quiet between us grew heavier. The moment to confront the realities of our situation loomed, yet none of us spoke the words hanging in the air. Instead, we retreated into ourselves, carrying the weight of what had been said and what remained unsaid. That night, sleep came reluctantly, chased away by the swirling storm of thoughts and emotions. The boundaries I had tried to maintain blurred, replaced by a growing awareness of desire, fear, and the precariousness of the path ahead. The yacht continued its motionless drift, a silent witness to the fragile unraveling of everything I thought I knew. The engine's steady hum was a small victory, but the air aboard the yacht was thick with tension that no mechanical repair could fix. The successful restart of the motor seemed to mark a shift, not in the voyage's course, but in the fragile balance between us. The yacht, once silent and still, now carried the low vibration of progress, but beneath that, something else was stirring, more volatile and uncertain. We moved through the afternoon with an uneasy rhythm. The boss's gaze found me more often, his attention no longer hidden behind the mask of professionalism. There was an unspoken acknowledgement, a shared secret that passed between us like a current beneath the waves. It was in the way he lingered near the rail, the subtle tilt of his head when I spoke, the brief touch that brushed my arm, small things, but heavy with meaning. We kissed. We kissed. The simplicity of the words belied the complexity of the moment, a quiet confession, a crossing of a boundary that neither of us dared name aloud. It was not a moment of reckless passion, but a silent pact between two people adrift, searching for something to anchor them amidst the chaos. My husband watched, though he said nothing. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of suspicion and restraint. He chose silence, perhaps hoping to maintain control by ignoring what was unfolding. But his silence only deepened the divide, a barrier that grew wider with each passing glance and avoided conversation. I felt the weight of my choices pressing down, the thrill of connection mingling with a growing sense of dread. The yacht felt smaller, the sea around us vast and indifferent to the storm brewing within our small vessel. each moment was a test of loyalty, of desire, of the fragile threads holding us together. The day faded into evening, the sky painted with the soft glow of sunset. Shadows lengthened across the deck as we gathered silently for dinner, the clink of cutlery filling the spaces where words might have been. The boss spoke easily, weaving stories and laughter that seemed distant from the tension between my husband and me. I found myself caught between two worlds, one of expectation and duty, the other of unspoken longing and risk. My husband's silence was a wall I could not climb, a reminder of the gulf that had opened between us. I longed to reach him, to find a way back to the warmth we had lost, but the path was obscured by years of neglect and unspoken grievances. Instead, I found myself leaning toward the other man, drawn by a magnetic pull I could neither deny nor fully understand. That night, the yacht rocked gently beneath the stars, a lullaby for restless souls. I lay awake, the memory of the kiss burning quietly within me, a secret flame in the dark. The choices I faced were stark and terrifying, the consequences unknown. Yet, amid the uncertainty, a part of me felt alive for the first time in years, awakening to possibilities I had long buried. The journey ahead promised no easy answers, only the unfolding of truths long kept at bay. And as the sea whispered its endless song, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed slipped into a pattern of strained quiet and unspoken tensions. The yacht glided over calm waters, yet beneath the surface, currents of unease and anticipation pulled us in different directions. My husband's efforts to bridge the gap between us were cautious, tentative gestures overshadowed by his lingering frustration and silent disappointment. He sought connection, but it felt more like grasping at shadows, an attempt to reclaim something slipping irretrievably away. I observed him closely, tracing the lines of fatigue etched around his eyes, the way his fingers clenched the railing when he thought no one was watching. His silence spoke volumes, a language of disappointment and resigned distance. Every glance he avoided, every word left unsaid, deepened the gulf between us. I longed for the warmth and openness we once shared, but it seemed buried beneath layers of neglect and unhealed wounds. The boss's presence continued to loom large, a steady undercurrent in the shifting emotional landscape. His attentiveness was unwavering, offering a refuge I hadn't realized I was seeking. He listened without judgment, his responses measured and genuine, allowing me to voice fears and frustrations I had kept locked inside. In his company, vulnerability felt less like a risk and more like a relief. Yet, this growing closeness came with its own burdens. Guilt gnawed at me relentlessly, a constant companion shadowing every shared smile and lingering glance. The knowledge that my actions fractured not only my marriage but also the fragile trust among us weighed heavily on my conscience. I was caught in a web of conflicting desires and responsibilities, each thread pulling me in opposing directions. Our conversations, though sparse, became charged with meaning. The words we exchanged were carefully chosen, layered with implication and caution. Beneath the surface, emotions swirled, hope, fear, regret, forming a complex tapestry that defied simple explanation. Moments of laughter were tinged with sadness, and silences were thick with what remained unsaid. The physical space of the yacht seemed to shrink as emotional distances expanded. The deck where we once stood as companions now felt like contested territory, each of us occupying separate islands of thought and feeling. The vastness of the sea around us mirrored the isolation I felt within myself, a paradox of proximity and separation. My thoughts often drifted to the life I had left behind, the routines, the promises, the quiet moments that had once felt sufficient. Now, those memories were tinged with longing and loss, reminders of what was slipping through my fingers. I wrestled with the realization that the future I had envisioned was no longer certain, replaced by an uncertain path fraught with risk. Despite the turmoil, I found moments of clarity and strength. The challenges forced me to confront truths I had avoided, to examine my own needs and desires with unflinching honesty. I recognized the gaps in my life, not just in love or companionship, but in understanding and self-acceptance. This journey was as much about rediscovering myself as it was about navigating the troubled waters of my marriage. As evening fell, painting the sky with shades of amber and rose, the yacht settled into a gentle sway. The world outside was serene, belying the emotional tempest within. I stood at the rail, watching the horizon blur between sea and sky, feeling the weight of decisions yet to be made. The silence around me was heavy but also filled with possibility, a quiet prelude to the revelations awaiting us all. The night came quietly, folding the yacht into shadows as the stars scattered like distant fires above. The weight of the day pressed down, each moment filled with the silence of things left unsaid and the gravity of decisions looming ahead. Within that stillness, the invisible walls between us began to thin, creating fragile bridges where none had been before. We found ourselves drawn together by circumstance and unspoken need, the vast emptiness of the sea surrounding us like a witness to the fragile truce we forged. The world beyond the yacht's hull faded into insignificance, leaving only the heat of presence and the steady rhythm of shared breaths. We spent the night together. The phrase held a quiet power, no more than those words, but beneath them lay a profound shift. It was not a surrender to reckless desire but an act of seeking refuge, an attempt to find solace in the midst of chaos. It was the merging of two souls adrift, grasping for connection when all else seemed uncertain. The intimacy was tempered by the knowledge of consequences, a delicate balance between comfort and caution. Every touch carried the weight of years of longing and regret, every glance a question without an answer. There was no need for words, the silence between us spoke volumes, a language understood without explanation. Meanwhile, my husband's presence lingered like a shadow I could not escape. His suspicions grew, though he masked them beneath a veneer of calm. The tension was palpable, a taut thread stretched between us, threatening to snap at the slightest provocation. I sensed his awareness of the shifting dynamics, his silent watchfulness adding a layer of complexity to an already fragile situation. The hours passed with the slow inevitability of a tide, carrying us toward a dawn that promised no easy resolutions. The night held us captive in its embrace, a space where boundaries blurred and truths became impossible to ignore. It was a turning point, a moment when the choices we made would ripple outward, changing the course of everything that followed. As morning approached, the first light cast a pale glow over the water, revealing the quiet aftermath of the night's fragile bond. The yacht, once a vessel of uncertainty, now carried a new weight, the unspoken understanding that nothing would be the same. The air was thick with emotion, a blend of hope, fear, and the lingering shadows of what had passed. I stood at the rail, watching the horizon widen with the promise of a new day. Inside, the turmoil raged on, conflicting desires, burgeoning guilt, and the uncertain path ahead. The delicate balance we had maintained teetered on the edge, poised between revelation and denial. The journey was far from over, the sea ahead vast and unpredictable. Yet, in that moment, amidst the quiet dawn, I felt the profound truth of our predicament, that love, loyalty, and longing were tangled threads in a web we could no longer unravel. The night had bound us in ways that would echo long after the waves had carried us back to shore. The days that followed our night together were heavy with an unspoken tension that clung to every corner of the yacht. The ocean around us remained calm, almost mocking in its indifference to the turmoil brewing within our confined space. Each of us moved carefully, as if navigating an invisible minefield where one wrong step could shatter the fragile balance. My husband's demeanor shifted noticeably. The distance between us grew more pronounced, marked not just by physical space but by an impenetrable emotional wall. His eyes, once so familiar, now carried a hardness that unsettled me deeply. He no longer spoke with the measured restraint of before but with a cold precision that cut through the quiet like a blade. I sensed that beneath his controlled exterior was a storm of suspicion and hurt, though he chose to bury it in silence. The boss, on the other hand, maintained his composed exterior, but his subtle glances in my direction betrayed a keen awareness of the shifting dynamics. His presence was both a comfort and a source of unease, a reminder of the secret we carried between us. The unspoken pact forged in the darkness hung over us like a shadow, influencing every interaction, every choice. Our conversations became sparse and guarded. When words were exchanged, they were laced with double meanings and cautious undertones. I found myself reading between the lines, searching for hints of truth in the pauses and glances. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of fear and desire, an emotional tension that made even the simplest moments feel fraught. I struggled with waves of guilt and confusion that ebbed and flowed unpredictably. The memory of our night together was a constant presence, a secret I carried alone. It was both a source of comfort and a reminder of the betrayal that weighed heavily on my conscience. I was caught in a complex web of emotions, longing for connection, wrestling with loyalty, and fearing the consequences of exposure. My husband's suspicion became increasingly difficult to ignore. Though he said nothing outright, his actions spoke volumes. He observed us with a quiet intensity, his eyes narrowing whenever the boss and I were near. The tension between the three of us was palpable, a silent battle waged in the spaces where words dared not tread. The yacht, once a place of escape and possibility, felt claustrophobic and charged with unresolved conflict. The vast sea outside was a stark contrast to the confinement of our situation, a reminder of the freedom that seemed just out of reach. I longed for clarity and resolution but feared the devastation that might come with truth. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the deck, the weight of our predicament pressed down with renewed force. The delicate balance we maintained was fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. Each passing moment brought us closer to a reckoning that none of us were prepared to face. In the quiet solitude of the cabin, I grappled with my own doubts and fears. The choices I had made now seemed both inevitable and fraught with peril. I questioned whether the connections forged in desperation could withstand the harsh light of day, or if they were destined to unravel and leave only pain in their wake. The night ahead promised no respite, only the continuation of a journey marked by uncertainty and emotional upheaval. The sea whispered its endless song outside, a haunting melody that mirrored the turmoil within. And as the darkness deepened, I knew that the fragile threads holding us together could snap at any moment, forever altering the course of our lives. The air between us shifted irrevocably the moment he pulled out his phone, the device a quiet harbinger of the storm to come. The yacht's confined space, once filled with fragile silences and subtle glances, now held a tension so sharp it was almost tangible. I watched as he navigated through the files, his face unreadable but his eyes betraying a mix of resolve and something darker, a cold determination that sent a chill down my spine. Then, the screen lit up with the evidence I had desperately hoped would remain hidden. The video, a silent witness to the moments I had tried to bury deep within myself, played out in sharp contrast to the words I had spoken and the promises I had made. Each frame a testament to betrayal, captured without consent or warning, turning intimacy into accusation. My husband's reaction was immediate yet restrained. His breath caught, a sharp intake that echoed through the small cabin. His hands clenched the edge of the table, knuckles white with the effort to maintain composure. I saw the fracture in his expression, the shattering of trust layered with disbelief and a profound hurt that seemed to age him in seconds. The boss stood beside me, his posture rigid, face a mask of controlled arrogance. There was a flicker of triumph in his eyes, but also an undeniable tension. He had chosen this moment to wield power, to upend the fragile equilibrium we had all tried to maintain. The video was his weapon, and its unveiling a calculated blow. In the heavy silence that followed, the weight of exposure settled over us. The yacht, once a sanctuary from the world, became a crucible where truths were laid bare and futures hung in the balance. The walls seemed to close in, the sea outside indifferent to the personal devastation unfolding within. My mind raced, grappling with the enormity of what had been revealed. The secret I had guarded so fiercely was no longer mine alone. The consequences I had feared were no longer hypothetical shadows but stark realities pressing down with unbearable force. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and yet strangely detached, like a spectator watching my life unravel. My husband's eyes met mine, filled with a storm of emotions that words could never fully capture. Betrayal, anger, sorrow, all converged in a silent scream that echoed louder than any accusation. I searched his face for a trace of the man I had loved, the man I had hoped to reach, but found only a fractured reflection. The confrontation that followed was raw and unfiltered, a collision of truths and denials, accusations and regrets. Voices raised in desperation, tears shed in disbelief, and moments of silence heavy with the weight of loss. The fragile threads holding us together frayed rapidly, unraveling the fabric of a relationship once thought unbreakable. In the midst of the chaos, I felt a strange clarity. The facade had crumbled, the illusions shattered, and what remained was the raw, painful reality of who we were and what we had become. The choices we had made, the secrets kept, and the betrayals borne had all led to this moment of reckoning. As the night deepened, the yacht became a vessel not just on the sea but in the tumultuous currents of our shattered lives. The future was uncertain, paths once clear now obscured by the shadows of pain and distrust. Yet, within that darkness, there flickered a faint possibility of understanding, of forgiveness, of a new beginning forged through the crucible of truth. But for now, we were left to navigate the storm we had unleashed, each of us adrift on our own tides of grief and hope, searching for a way forward in a world forever changed. The aftermath was a quiet storm, a sea of fractured emotions settling into uneasy calm. The yacht, once a symbol of escape and renewal, had become a vessel of reckoning, carrying us through the aftermath of truths revealed and bonds broken. The weight of what had transpired hung heavy in the air, thickening the silence that now stretched between us. I found myself grappling with the full scope of my choices, the ripple effects cascading through the lives entwined aboard this fragile craft. The faces around me bore the marks of pain, betrayal, and disbelief, each expression a mirror reflecting the fractures in our once solid foundation. The distance between us was no longer just physical, it was an emotional chasm shaped by broken trust and shattered hopes. My husband retreated into himself, his gaze distant and hollow, as if searching for answers beyond the horizon. The anger and sorrow etched into his features spoke of a man wrestling with a future unmoored from certainty. There was no grand confrontation now, only the silent recognition that everything had changed irreversibly. The boss, once a figure of confidence and control, now seemed diminished, his presence a reminder of the choices that had brought us here. The power he wielded through the unveiling of secrets felt hollow in the face of the quiet devastation left in its wake. His calculated actions had unraveled the delicate fabric we had all tried to preserve. In the solitude of my cabin, I confronted the raw edges of my conscience. The journey from denial to acceptance was jagged and painful, filled with moments of doubt and clarity. I faced the truth of my own desires, fears, and failings with a newfound honesty that both terrified and liberated me. The sea outside continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to the turmoil within. Its vastness mirrored the uncertainty ahead, a vast expanse of possibilities and consequences, of endings and beginnings. The horizon was no longer a distant dream but a looming reality, demanding decisions I was not yet ready to make. In the days that followed, the fragile threads of our relationships began to unravel further, exposing the vulnerabilities beneath. Attempts at reconciliation were tentative and fraught with hesitation, as each of us navigated the delicate balance between forgiveness and self-preservation. The path forward was obscured by shadows of doubt and the scars of betrayal. Yet, amidst the wreckage, there was a glimmer of something unexpected, a chance for growth, understanding, and perhaps healing. The experience had stripped away illusions, forcing a confrontation with the complexities of human connection and the resilience of the human heart. As the yacht finally turned toward home, the journey transformed from one of escape to one of reckoning. The sea, once a backdrop to our tangled lives, now stood as a witness to our shared ordeal and the uncertain promise of what lay beyond. In the quiet moments before dawn, I allowed myself a fragile hope that even in the wake of profound loss, there could be a new beginning. A beginning forged not in secrecy and silence, but in truth, courage, and the difficult work of rebuilding what had been broken. The story of that voyage, of the choices made and consequences faced, was far from over. But in embracing the truth, I took the first step toward a future shaped not by past mistakes, but by the strength to move forward.